Academica Media. From Academica Media Studios in Miami, Florida, it's Big Ideas in Education, a weekly recap of inspiration and innovation in your schools.
Welcome to the show, everybody. I'm Ryan Carella. Our topic this week is insurance risk management in education. And joining us to expound on that topic is Jonathan Schreter, the Executive Vice President at IMA Financial Group and a leading insurance broker for charter and independent K-12 schools. Our guest is also a certified insurance counselor with the National Alliance for Insurance Education and Resource. You can find out more about our guest's work by visiting imacorp.com. Jonathan, thank you so much for joining us.
Ryan, appreciate the invite. Thanks for having me.
I am so interested in this topic, Jonathan. As a legal professional for education organizations in my non-broadcasting life, I am intimately familiar with how important this area is for charter schools. In fact, not 10 minutes before doing this interview, I was on the phone with insurance brokers setting up some insurance packages for charter schools because it's renewal season, and boy, is that a fun time for the folks that I work with. Tell us a little bit generally about why insurance is important for charter and independent schools. Why is this something that should be on the top of mind of these institutions?
I appreciate that, Ryan. Yeah, it's a must-have. It's often required by their authorizer. It's certainly going to be required by state law. Insurance isn't one of those, gee, I think it'd be a good thing. It's typically required. What's important to think about is, am I setting up my program to reflect my portfolio to reflect the real risks of my organization? And I think thinking through what our risks are and what is it you're actually trying to do with insurance as a tool is really the key question that schools consider around the topic.
And managing that portfolio, Jonathan, can be a maddening experience, particularly for folks who don't have a background in insurance like many of our charter school board members do, because it is so easy to get lost in the alphabet soup that is insurance for schools, right? You got your ELLs, you got your D&Os, you got your GLs. Just too many letters to even contend with. And so when you are sitting down with a potential insurance client, such as a charter school board, how do you kind of lay things out for them so that they can make sense of the alphabet soup?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I love that in that my primary goal is to educate the client, the school client, in a way that they understand what I'm doing so well that I can do my job better. So it is an imperative that they understand those letters. And as an English lit major and a former marketing and advertiser before I got into the insurance world, educating and telling that story in a way that lands to unsophisticated is the wrong word, but folks that just don't have the day-to-day experience that my industry has in using those acronyms is a really key point in making sure that they know what they have and why they have it.
Yeah. Now, one of the early steps that I know folks in your line of work will do with charter school clients to get them that insurance is they have to fill out application paperwork. The underwriters need to know what they're insuring, what the risks are, how much revenue is coming in, how many employees does that organization have to properly underwrite a policy. And I know for a lot of boards, that can be a very difficult experience. Sometimes those applications are very hard to fill out. Sometimes there are questions where you're like, oh, that's kind of a judgment call. I'm not really sure how to answer that one way or another. And again, for part-time board members who are doing this as a volunteer gig, that can seem like a lot, and they might be afraid that if they answer a question slightly wrong, it could lead to denial of coverage later. I'm curious, because I've never had an opportunity to ask this of somebody in your role. How do you sit down with charter schools and help them with that application experience to make sure that they write things the way they need to? And do you have any advice for those board members in how to fill out those forms to make sure they don't get themselves in trouble later?
Yeah, it is the least favorite part of our business. And as you mentioned, this is renewal season. So many schools have a July 1 renewal date. So
yeah,
the timing
they do.
is usually right here. And as an education practice leader, it's a lot of work in a condensed period of time. So I feel you in needs of efficiency around that. Oftentimes, it should be just the first year that's the most challenging, because it's unlikely for schools to really change their modus operandi over the course of the year, where a lot of the questions that are asked in an application are changing. So my hope is that your schools are finding a way to keep those applications on hand so that the follow-up's really just, where am I changing data? Maybe it's salaries or student count, et cetera, where it's what we call the exposure basis. That's really where you're spending your time. But the applications are, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say the applications are imperative because that's where the underwriter gets their information about what the risk profile of the school is. And so while it's tedious, the better we can answer and make the carriers comfortable with the risk they're taking on, because ultimately that's what insurance policy is. We're transferring risk to another entity, and they want to feel comfortable about taking on that risk. And the more comfortable they are about the risk, the better your costs are going to be. So the more information you can provide them to give them comfort that you're addressing the risks they're trying to insure, the better off the end result in terms of the premium you're going to pay is going to be.
That makes a lot of sense. And in terms of managing risk across different entities, I know that a lot of charter school clients these days are getting into what are called risk pools or JPAs, these joint power authorities. Can you talk a little bit about what these are? What's the difference between those programs and how an insurance broker would more traditionally engage with a charter school?
Super question, and it's true. There is a rise in popularity, and there has been popularity around these risk pools and JPAs. So how I define them, a risk pool or a JPA is an aggregated set of schools. School districts will often use them singularly, but the charter schools at state by state have an ability to sort of aggregate their risks together in a risk pool. And by doing so, they sort of leverage the law of large numbers in the hopes of controlling rate. The challenge I have with those programs is they're often a one-size-fits-all solution because they have to be built to reflect the various risks of the charter schools in that pool. Some are required to carry high limits of liability insurance. Others have unique programs like aviation or diving that would require a unique risk profile that the JPA has to consider as well. But you can't slice and dice it to reflect your particular risk. It's sort of you get what you get and you don't get upset. And the program also is priced on the success and failure of that pool. So if the pool performs well together, that's a benefit to the pool. But if there are bad actors or unfortunate severe claims in that pool, it's going to impact the rate renewal of all of the schools in the program because all ships are going to rise and sink together.
Absolutely.
I follow. So working with a broker, you will sort of build your own destiny. You really can work to identify what are my specific liability limits that are required? What are the risks I have as a school? Are there any unique programs that I need to reflect that risk in the insurance policies I'm creating? And in doing so, and if I'm successful and I commit to managing those risks well, I can control my costs much better than when I'm linking to other schools where I have no control. So those are the real differentiators between the JPA and working with a broker.
That's really interesting. And since you brought it up, you're talking about unique academic programs and how they can change a school's risk profile and potentially that school's insurance premiums. Sure. You talked about like if a school has like a diving program or an aeronautics program, or even schools that have dormitories, right? That creates a lot of additional risks. One type of school where I'm really starting to see some pretty interesting risk profiles and creating some unique challenges for folks in your roles are virtual schools and how it affects their insurability. I'm seeing a lot more virtual clients come through my legal practice, and I'm working with a lot of insurance brokers who have to, profile the risk of these virtual schools. And I'd love for you to kind of reflect on how those risk profiles can be different. Because what I've come to find is, on one hand, maybe you're getting some breaks on the general liability side of things because you don't have the physical campus, you don't have the security guards, you don't have students coming onto the campus and things like that. On the other hand, all of that technology is really raising that risk profile. So your cyber policies become a lot more important. Data breaches become a lot more important. Love for you to speak on that.
Yeah, it's a really great question. So virtual, non-site-based, homeschool, there are a lot of words to reflect, I think, the risk you're talking about. One of the big, I couldn't agree more on the cyber. In a virtual world, if you get shut down, your systems get shut down in any way, and you're unable to access the students you're educating because you've answered a viral email that shut down and what we call bricking your systems, make you incapable of reaching your students. That's a real risk that has to be contemplated. And what kind of training do you go through to mitigate that? And then what steps do you have to get back up and operating quickly so you can? And how would the insurance respond to those circumstances because of the lost income of being unable to access your students? Cyber in that world is clearly a primary consideration. One of the ones I find a lot, it's more risk mitigation strategies, because a lot of those virtual schools are developing a specific curriculum around the students who apply. So in the bandwidth of public schools and their districts sort of have a one-size-fits-all curriculum often, and that's what the district will teach. The charter school at least gets to hone that a little bit more, and maybe they're a military school, or maybe they're STEM, or maybe they're arts, and where their focus is and their mission is different and unique, and that has to be considered. Homeschooling, virtual learning, hones it even further. They allow that student to really define what their education path is going to look like and be, and sometimes that includes using third-party vendors to really hone. Maybe it's a music teacher, maybe it's an athletic coach, that aren't necessarily employees of the school, but are a resource that they've vetted to make sure that the student gets the experience they're looking for. Now the question is, how does your insurance respond to circumstances related to those third-party vendors? Are they going to cover circumstances those vendors create in their education of your student? Or are you going to require that each of those vendors carry a line of insurance themselves to act as what we call the primary layer in the event they're the cause of some negligence that the school gets brought into, but we at least have a primary layer to use before the school's insurance gets affected. Big issue for those virtual schools who are creating those unique education opportunities.
Well, and oftentimes the insurance company might require the vendors to have that primary liability
Correct.
as a condition of coverage, or at least of coverage with a manageable premium for the school.
Correct. And one of the challenges in that regard is, and it's a challenging topic to discuss, but it has to be put out there, molestation and abuse coverage, or what we call SAM coverage.
Yeah.
The vendors are often asked to carry it. And in this new world we live in, and unfortunately, those sort of claims have risen to the point where carriers are really reticent to write the coverage unless they collect a significant amount of premium. And sometimes when that ask is made of that vendor to carry SAM coverage, it prices them out of the market, because that's a big lump for a single piano teacher to carry on behalf of the school requirements. So really thinking through what the ask is and how you're mitigating risk becomes a really important conversation to have with those vendors.
Man, there's a lot of moving parts here, and it's getting me thinking about all the stuff I got to work on once this interview is over. Because again, it's renewal season, and folks in my line of work and in your line of work, Jonathan, quite busy right now.
No doubt.
Let's start all the way back at the beginning here. Because we've talked about a lot of the policies that are in place and a lot of what you do with these school clients to help them get the coverages they need. But let's talk about the start point, that point zero. What should schools be doing? What information should they be gathering? What should they have set up and ready to show you when they eventually do bring you in to help put that coverage together? What is your ideal client already doing before that first call with you to set themselves up for success, to make sure they get the insurance they need?
Ryan, are you talking about someone who's just hanging the shingle of the school for the first time, or has been operating for a bit?
Probably one that's been operating for a bit, but I'd say either case is important. But what are they doing on the front end to prepare for this?
Yeah, so it's a good question. The data that they typically need is going to be things like payroll, student count, revenues, understanding what your P&L, your profit and loss statements look like, and the financials. That's going to be a key one. That's a key metric. And they just use it. Look, insurance needs something to rate their coverage on. And it'll often be in terms of student count, because the more students you handle, the greater risk you have. In terms of payroll, the larger your payroll, the more faculty and staff you have, the more risk you have. Property values, how big are your buildings and how much stuff do you have in them? That's a rating basis, right? So tracking the rating basis is going to be a question that's going to come out of the gate. How big you are, how many students you are, what's your payroll? The other question is going to be a chance to review those policies. So especially if you're evaluating maybe an exit from a JPA or you're already with a broker, getting eyes on what your current coverage is, it's a fun exercise for me because it tells a story about the institution that if it matches what they are, then their insurance is probably in a good spot. But if I come back with questions that say, you told me you had an aviation program, but I see no coverage for aviation here, that's signs that maybe the portfolio is not as complete as it should be, and it's going to lead to some further conversation. So access to the current portfolio and an understanding of some of that exposure basis we talked about, I think would be two important steps for a school to have.
Boy, I wish I'm going to record that, Jonathan, and just send that to my clients before renewal season starts, so that we're not all scrambling to put that information together, while the clock's running out on renewal. That's really great insight, and we really appreciate you giving it to us there, Jonathan. Sure. You can find out more about our guest's work by visiting imacorp.com. Jonathan, before we let you go, love to get your perspective on our final question. If, with the snap of your fingers, you could make any change to the education system, what change would it be?
Oh, it's such a good question, Ryan. Two things come to mind, so I'm going to take advantage of giving you two answers. One is I'd love to see teachers elevated to the same echelon as sports heroes or theater heroes. Like teachers in my life that have had an impact on me don't get nearly the big public credit that I think they deserve, and I wish that could happen. And I hope education continues. The second is I hope education continues to go down a path of enhancing critical thinking. So much data is available to us on the internet, on our phones, and it's just data. The real trick moving forward is, what are you doing with it? No longer is it a world which I grew up in, which was teaching was regurgitation. 1 + 1 is 2. George Washington was the first president of the United States. They teach, I regurgitate in the form of a test. What do you do with that data? What does that help you think about and think about critically in terms of how you're going to use that data moving forward? Continuing to create curricula that supports that, I think, is going to be really imperative.
I couldn't agree with you more. I'm really glad I waited for two pieces of insight there because they were both fantastic. And I love what you brought up in the beginning about us treating teachers the way we treat sports heroes. Slightly off topic, but have you ever seen the Key and Peele sketch where they do like a whole sketch about like if, it's like it looks like Sports Center, right? Where you have the two Sports Center anchors, but instead of reporting on sports, they're reporting on teachers like they are athletes.
The track that went down, that sounds exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I'm going to send you this clip. It's going to dazzle you. And for our viewers and listeners, I just, type in just Key and Peele, teachers like athletes, and it's going to be exactly what Jonathan's talking about. And I absolutely want to live in that world. Jonathan, thank you so much for joining us this week.
Appreciate the time, Ryan. And thanks for the questions. And hopefully there was some value there.
Oh, so much value. Thank you very much. And thank you all for checking out Big Ideas in Education.
The views expressed on the preceding program have been those of the hosts and guests and do not necessarily reflect the views of Academica, its clients, staff, affiliates, or advertisers.